Welcome, everybody, to How to Leverage Data to Support an Equitable Energy Transition. My name is Lily Smith, and I'm excited to be here today to help host our fourth installment in SEIA's Energy and Security webinar series. As folks are still piling on, I'll go through a couple of housekeeping notes. Please note that the webinar is being recorded. If you have questions throughout the presentations, we encourage you to drop them in the Q&A box, and our panelists will respond after the presentation. Following the webinar, we'll send out the recording, slide deck, and any resources mentioned throughout the presentation to all of the registrants. Please note that there will also be a short survey immediately following the webinar. We'd appreciate y'all filling that out for us. Joy, if you could go ahead and move to the next slide for me. Before we hop into today's webinar, we wanted to provide a bit of context to the work that the SEIA does in the Southeast. SEIA promotes efficient energy as a catalyst for economic growth, workforce development, and energy security across 11 southeastern states and 5 island territories. Next slide, please. We provide research, consultation, and education, stakeholder facilitation, program management, and financial services to a range of stakeholders working in the energy sector. At this point, I'll go ahead and turn things over to Research Associate Joy Ward.
Great. All right. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Joy Ward, and welcome to How to Leverage Data to Support an Equitable Energy Transition. Thank you for joining us today. Today, we are joined by my colleague, Lily Smith, as well as special guests, Abigail Fleming and Teresa Pinto from the peer group, and Jerry Carey and Daniel Pate from NCSEA. So a little bit of background on what today's webinar has, what inspired today's webinar. SEIA inherited the Southeast Energy and Security Stakeholder Initiative, a report containing a series of stakeholder recommendations addressing energy and security in the region from the Nichols Institute at Duke University in 2022. In response, SEIA has begun work on the Southeast Energy and Security Project to implement the recommendations outlined by Duke. 2 initiatives include the formation of the Southeast Energy and Security Project Leadership Forum and the development of this webinar series. Members of the Leadership Forum include original contributors to the development of the stakeholder recommendations, and as a part of their work, 2 grants were selected and awarded funding for project work which aligns with the stakeholder initiatives. In addition, the webinar series was created to complement these recommendations as a whole. There are 24 recommendations that fall into 6 working groups, including systemic change, housing, awareness and community engagement, data access and improvement, programs and access to financing, and utility solutions. Lily's going to drop in the chat if you'd like to learn more about those stakeholder recommendations. Moving to the next slide. So today we are talking about data access and improvement, a set of recommendations which include recommendations such as requiring utilities to collect, track, and report detailed data such as late fees, shutoffs, develop a data dictionary to facilitate data requests, establish data sharing programs, develop a process for community participation in identifying energy and security data needs, and require a utility data collection and disparity gap analysis. On that note, I have the pleasure of turning the mic over to Teresa Pinto and Abigail Fleming for their presentation. And just so you guys know, let me know next slide and I can move that slide for you.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Joy. If you could go ahead and start us off on our first slide, that would be fantastic. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining us, and thanks to SEIA for inviting us. My name is Abigail Fleming, and I'm a staff attorney with the peer group. And I'll toss it to Teresa to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Yes, thank you so much for this opportunity to be here and present to your stakeholders today. I'm Teresa Pinto. I'm also a staff attorney at the peer group. And we're here today to talk a little bit about the need for energy justice and data access in South Florida, and kind of set the level of what's going on the ground here in the greater Miami area.
And Joy, next slide. So just to give everyone an introduction about peer group and what we do, the peer group is a neighborhood nonprofit law firm that addresses issues at the intersection of climate, the environment, economy, and social justice. And we advocate for and seek to build power within marginalized communities. We work alongside nonprofits, social corporations, environmental entities who are really vested in a just transition and just ensuring economic and environmental sustainability and resilience. And we seek to shift power through systemic change using policy resources, education, interdisciplinary research, impact litigation, and direct legal services. And I'll talk about some of those in just a minute. And we work alongside communities of color throughout South Florida, South Miami, Miami Gardens, Dunbar, Liberty City, Little Haiti, Allapattah, Overtown, and so forth. Next slide. And as I said, we do this in many different ways, but today I want to talk about the policy resources, direct services, and education. So within policy resources, we develop policy resources and work in coalition on various policy campaigns as related to housing, the environment, and so forth. Many of these policy resources, as you can imagine, require data. And I will discuss some of the resources that we've developed in just a minute. Also, another big part of our work is direct services. So general counsel, we represent nonprofit organizations and provide general counsel services. Historically, we've also done impact litigation. So we've provided litigation support in toxic tort and noise pollution cases. And then one of our main direct services that we provide is that we have an equitable weatherization clinic. So in partnership with Catalyst Miami, Miami-Dade County, Solar Energy Loan Fund, and many other partners, we created the Equitable Weatherization Clinic in 2021. And it's really the first model of its kind. It really assists impacted communities in two ways. First, advocating for equitable weatherization policies, and then working directly with clients on a pro bono basis to access weatherization services. Through working with partners and audits, we realized that we were able to identify barriers to weatherization and just gaps in programs. And we're trying to work alongside stakeholders to develop solutions to any of those barriers. One, for example, is funding. So we really worked to make sure that and advocate for equitable funding and towards weatherization services, and making sure that our clients have access to those and removing them so they can have access and benefit from programs. And then finally, education. Teresa and I are both work full-time as professors at the University of Miami, and we're really passionate about developing innovative approaches to legal education and services in order to train the next generation of advocates in the practice of or within a just transition. We've already had 2 cohorts of students graduate from our environmental justice program. Students take part in an 8-week program over the summer, and they engage in seminar and practicums, and then also work on case and campaign work that the peer group is supporting and working on. Next slide, please.
So I would like to just take an opportunity here to talk a little bit about our work more and how it intersects with data access and energy insecurity and energy efficiency. In much of our work, it seems a lot of barriers to equitable and sustainable development intersect around housing justice. You can't really talk about energy efficiency and the need for data to address energy insecurity without also talking about energy justice. And you can't talk about energy justice without also talking about housing justice, it seems. In this regard, Florida shares commonalities with the rest of the Southeast and much of the nation, but is also unique in some ways. Like elsewhere, energy efficiency is linked tightly to energy justice and housing justice. Communities in South Florida suffered through all of the known Jim Crow era discriminatory housing policies, such as urban renewal and slum clearance, redlining, restrictive covenants, leaving a legacy of segregation, unsafe and unsustainable housing, and extreme wealth disparities that severely contributed to the marginalization of low-income, Native American, and Black and Brown communities throughout the area. Here I have a picture representative of this kind of history and legacy. This picture shows an actual playground that was constructed by the city of Miami and at the behest of prominent African-American civic leaders, and to great grand fanfare, built for Black children of Overtown under I-95, which was the highway that basically bisected and destroyed the community. So further downstream from that, what you see now is that Floridians are feeling the effects of this history in one way by having double the energy burden than their national counterparts, hovering around 7.2%, with some communities having quadrupled the energy burden, a little bit over 12%. Next slide, please. And then what is really now occurring, continuing this legacy of kind of marginalization and discrimination, is rapid gentrification and forced displacement, kind of the new terms for the policies of urban renewal and slum clearance. It is much easier, of course, to encroach on and redevelop under-resourced areas that are viewed as unvaluable because of historically racist and discriminatory policies. When you add to that climate change and South Florida's unique geography, which I show here kind of a map of the topography. Most know that South Florida is flat and sits at sea level or not much above it, but there is this coral rock ridge with elevations up to 7 feet above sea level that runs along Biscayne Bay. And when Florida was first being developed in the early 1900s, the railways were built along this ridge. So the Black and brown folks who helped build the railway were often settled near them. And so many of the legacy Jim Crow communities currently exist along this ridge, which sits at a higher elevation. So with sea level rise and increased flooding in the area, these areas that were once considered, the areas that were once considered desirable, now along the coasts and the oceans are now considered undesirable, and people are rapidly gentrifying along this coral rock ridge. If you add to that too the increasing number of extreme heat days, of course, requiring more energy to cool your home, you can envision now how climate change is really exacerbating the housing and energy injustices that have historically been in our area. And then I feel we should also give quick mention to, of course, the political climate in Florida, which sets a baseline of discrimination and injustice in many ways. Often leaving organizations like ours and our partners to be advocating just for basic rights, let alone energy efficiency and access to energy data. Next slide, please. So in our work, we also find that the state's energy utility, Florida Power and Light, is a barrier itself to energy security and efficiency. FPL is not alone in putting their shareholders before the public good, climate change, or energy justice. Here is a graphic where you can see during COVID, right, the past due electric bills increased threefold in the area, yet at the same time, FPL was petitioning for a rate hike, while also threatening to shut power off to those who couldn't pay the bills in this threefold increase. Along with many community members and other organizations, we had to advocate against the rate hike, without more protections for low-income folks, and more also renewable energy development, which wasn't part of it. Next slide, please. And just a little bit more, right? FPL has also used its power legislatively to stifle rooftop and community-controlled solar energy in the state. There are a couple of strong examples. Amendment 1 in 2016, which basically tried to impose fees on people who had rooftop solar, while also trying to keep out competition from solar energy producers, and a net metering bill in 2022 that would have drastically reduced net metering. And it was actually passed, but vetoed by the current governor. However, the rate hike was eventually passed after much advocacy against it and even a lawsuit. So in 2022, some saw a spike as much as 178% in their energy bills, regardless of whether they had rooftop solar or not. This year, FPL has already raised rates once again in January and are planning to raise rates 2 more times. So you can imagine what this is going to do to energy insecurity in the area. And this graphic here also shows, right, that FPL in the Southeast has ranked in the bottom 3 in energy efficiency performance for nearly a decade. This is just the latest data, and nationally ranks 51 out of 52 in really trying to focus on energy efficiency. So yeah, these are just a few of the examples of how the utility in the state also acts as a barrier. Next slide, please. So as Abigail mentioned earlier, one of the programs that attempts to address these issues of gentrification, forced displacement, energy insecurity, and housing injustice is the Equitable Weatherization Clinic, where we try to connect folks to weatherization services and benefits which, as most of you probably know, is increased energy efficiency, cost savings, health benefits, more sustainable housing, and maybe a way to give people power over their own housing situation, right? Rather than face kind of these uncontrollable impacts from gentrification and forced displacement. So yeah, research has shown nationwide that marginalized communities in general have inequitable access to weatherization services. So we hope that the clinic helps to kind of address that disparity as well. And now Abigail is actually going to talk about another policy kind of program that we've assisted in to also address this kind of housing injustice and energy insecurity in the area.
So yeah, I want to talk about the displacement vulnerability and mitigation tool. This tool was created at the Environmental Justice Clinic at the University of Miami School of Law, and PEER has been supporting the EJC in making it more accessible and an active platform that our community partners can use. Teresa and I, like as many of you probably agree, that climate justice in Florida must account for the ways in which marginalized communities have been and really continue to be subject to predatory developments and policies that really put communities in substandard environmental conditions. And this is intensifying, right, in the wake of climate change. So the clinic created the DVMT, as we call it for short, and it allows developers and local municipalities to forecast the risk of displacement from a proposed development, and also provides research-informed strategies to mitigate this displacement. So it aggregates data on an existing property of the proposed development, also the neighboring community and any anticipated property uses. And it really provides a snapshot of community composition. And then it aggregates that data, and we do an analysis and to determine the community's susceptibility to displacement based on various indicators. And then based on that susceptibility score, the tool will provide mitigation strategies to address any potential impact of the proposed development. We created this in collaboration with our community partners, but now we've taken it from a piece of paper, we've put it into a platform so that any community member can now go on and be able to plug in the address of a development and pull data about the surrounding community, and then see different mitigation factors that they could advocate for. We're currently beta testing the platform and just making sure there's no bugs. And so we're hoping to launch this and make it public in August. So we'll be spending this summer getting feedback and just input from different stakeholders. And then we're going to work with Miami-Dade County to hopefully have this as part of a policy or practice within the county government to ensure that when we have these massive developments in areas that are on higher elevation, that have been historically marginalized, that elected officials are thinking through, right? What are the impacts on community, and what can we make sure this development brings to the community so the displacement doesn't occur? The tool was built in collaboration with partners, but I think as we continue to build it, there's definitely going to be feedback as we work with developers and elected officials to see how we can make this accessible, but actually useful in planning. But data is an essential key piece to it. And it's really, I think in many ways, as we've been working with clients in the past couple of years, really given them a foundation, right, for advocacy. So whether they're presenting in front of the City of Miami Commission or just another group of individuals, they've been able to use this data to show the direct impacts and then the actual mitigation strategies that can be put in place to help support and prevent displacement of communities here in South Florida. So that is all we have today, and I'm sure Teresa and I are happy to take questions on any of our work, the tool, or anything else that you guys want to chat through.
I actually have one question to get us started.
Yeah.
And while I'm doing this, I hope the audience can feel free to drop some questions in the chat. But one question that I took from watching your presentation was that you talked a lot about advocacy and the role that plays in the work that you do. So what is something, and it sounds like you support a lot of nonprofit initiatives. So what is something that someone at the individual level or even not for profits, or rather profit-driven organizations, utilities, what can they do in this role of advocacy? to support those that you work with?
Abigail, I don't know. I don't know if I have an answer to that.
And I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I understand the correction,
Yeah, I'll rephrase my question in that I'm noticing that a big theme of your work is advocacy, and a lot of that advocacy is going with these disadvantaged groups. You're supporting a lot of nonprofit organizations, but what can we do at the individual level or even
Okay.
at the for-profit level? Does that help?
Yeah, definitely. So I would say at an individual level, get involved and support local nonprofits that are doing this work, right? At an individual level, you can definitely get involved. I would say also know who your local municipality is, who are your commissioners, who are these people making these planning decisions. That's really important. If you're able to show up at meetings and make public comment, right? If there is a proposed development that's going to impact your surrounding area or another, right? It's always helpful to be involved in that piece. But I also think there's ways that people can be, less directly involved if they want to petition or if they find an organization that they believe in the values and principles of, right? Whether that's like funding or supporting it and financially, or just like signing on to petitions maybe that an organization has. I would also say another key piece, it seems very standard, but like vote, right? Like I know a lot of people that don't. So, that's another important key piece of it. And I would also say just reading and educating yourself on these various issues, that's extremely important. And I think a lot of this work takes some deep reflection and self-awareness, which I know, some have I think aren't always there, right, in their like self-transformation. So I think that also oftentimes we take a lot of time to plan and act, but we don't take a lot of time to reflect. So I think as an individual, absolutely. And I also think just like corporation wise, right, to really corporations to think deeply, right, and do more of that deep reflection on what are their values and principles, right? How are they working with local organizations? How are they ensuring equity is a cornerstone of their work? And also, I see a lot of times that corporations doing like a checks, right? Like, oh, we did that to check, but not like deeply experiencing it and ensuring it's part of their culture. I think that makes a big difference. But I think a lot of this work, and I don't know, Teresa, if you want to add anything, but has a lot to do with mindset, right? And our values, right? Like how we think about others, and how we show empathy towards others and what they're going through and what they're really living, right? Their lived experience. I don't know if you had, Teresa, anything to add.
I just wanted to add that we don't just represent nonprofits. So sometimes we are general counsel to for-profits that are doing this kind of deep reflection about their values and making sure that their values align with, equity and environmental sustainability and things like that.
Thank you. Right.
Joy, I wanted to go ahead and ask a question and then we can see if the audience has anything, if that's cool with you.
Sure.
Kind of as displacement, vulnerability, and weatherization meet, I guess with gentrification being a big cause of displacement vulnerability in y'all's region, we've been working a bit with folks that are seeing surrounding property values increasing because of gentrification being a cause for deferrals for weatherization. Has that been y'all's experience at all, that the increasing property values, even if the person living in the home would normally meet the threshold for program participation, isn't getting access to the program because property rates are going up? I'm wondering if this has been your experience in Florida. We've been noticing it a bit in Georgia.
I'd have to say that we're not seeing that.
Okay.
Mostly, we don't have. The problem really is, again, that there's not there's not access to too many weatherization programs. Just this year, Miami-Dade County has implemented a few more programs, but the need is so great that money gets kind of snapped up right away, let's say. And all of the programs are really based on income, not on property value. That increased property value, though, what that's doing is putting pressure on homeowners in these homes that need weatherization, but they don't really have access to the programs to sell. or to leave and just add to that whole process, right, of this rapid gentrification that's going on.
Okay, thank you for that.
Cool. Thank you. Well, we'd like to pass it off to Daniel Page.
I think we
Engineer
have a
Carey.
question real
Oh,
quick.
perfect. Thanks for stopping me.
Oh, I see that they're asking about like a link to the tool. Like I said, we're launching in August, so it's not public yet, but I'll definitely share it with this team, absolutely. And I'd love to have like a discussion again with you guys and get your feedback. But as soon as it's available in August and the platform goes live, I'll happily share it.
Thank you for stopping me. Seeing no other questions at the moment in the chat or the Q&A box, I'm now going to pass it off to Daniel Page and Jerry Carey of NCS EA to present their data tool.
Yeah, thank you, Lily, and thank you, Joy, and thanks to SIA for allowing us this platform. And that was a great presentation by the peer group. I am Daniel Pate from the North Carolina Sustainable Energy Association. We are a nonprofit based in North Carolina. We are heavily focused on policy, so we intervene at the State Utilities Commission, and we advocate for more clean energy in the state of North Carolina. And I'm on the Energy Data Solutions team. Our team is responsible for providing a lot of insights and data on the state clean energy landscape. And then our team also works a lot on developing particularly energy efficiency programs that are inclusive to those markets that traditionally don't have access to clean energy technology, such as low to moderate income homes. So we do a lot of work in that. And I will kick it off to Jerry real quick for him to do a short intro.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jerry. I'm Market Innovation Specialist with NCSEA on the Energy Data Solutions team. And primarily my role is data analyst, which involves a lot of data collecting and data cleaning. And then I do the GIS work as well. So I'm in charge of a lot of the visuals, whether it's internal or forward facing on our website. So today we're going to present what we're calling a hub that is going to eventually be a forward-facing dashboard through Power BI. We call it the Sustainable Energy Data Hub. So it's just a hub that shows all the clean energy adoption throughout the state in different technologies.
Yeah, so basically this isn't going to be a traditional presentation. This will be a demo. And so Jerry's actually going to bring up the hub and walk through it and show everyone all of the data we have. And I'll get more into what we're looking for in this webinar, but I'll give some quick background real quick on how we got to where we are with the hub now. So a couple of years ago at NCSEA, our team has these disparate data sources regarding clean energy. And we were trying to figure out how to make them more useful, how we could make them valuable to people beyond us, beyond our organization. And it started with, we have a lot of local government members. A lot of key local governments in North Carolina are our members. So we realized that a lot of the data we had, and Jerry will get more into all the individual data sources, but a lot of the data we have, we realized would be of value to local governments for their sustainability planning and seeing how they could track on their clean energy goals. So we started with using these data sources to create basically static reports. And these reports showed the local governments where there were clean energy systems in their territories. And it also benchmarked them with cities that were, or counties that were similar to them. So we were creating these reports, and they were of value to local governments. We got some good feedback, but we also got feedback regarding how it would be more valuable to make this data more dynamic, right? So have it updated in real time. The local governments wanted to choose the cities that they would like to benchmark themselves with and not have us choose them for them. So this basically led to the idea of, instead of delivering static reports, we would create this dynamic online hub where it could be updated in real time, and you can click and choose what data to look at, and we could add more data as we get it, particularly energy equity focused data, and being able to see which areas face high energy burden. And that's I know what's really relevant to this webinar. So currently we launched this hub, I think, about a year ago, and we are still in what we call the demo phase. So we've been meeting with local governments, presenting the hub to them, walking them through them, and getting feedback on how to make it more valuable. Questions such as what data would be good to add to it, what information is important for energy planning. And so we've been doing that lately. And also what this webinar is going to be very helpful for is extending, increasing the stakeholder group. So lately it's just been local governments, but we'd love to get the viewpoints of advocates and of others beyond local government. So we think this would be a great chance to do that. And yeah, I'll just reiterate that this isn't a finished product, and we hope to get some good feedback through the chat or in the Q&A at the end. But without further ado, I'll let Jerry go ahead and share his screen, and he'll start walking through all the various data we have. And if you have any questions or have any feedback as Jerry's going through the hub, then we welcome that you ask those questions and provide any feedback in the chat.
Thank you, Daniel. And just to reiterate, sorry, please don't feel free to stop me at any point to ask a question. Daniel's monitoring the chat, so if it's relevant to the dashboard I'm on, we'll try to capture that as we move through. So this is our Sustainable Energy Hub. This is done in Power BI. It's not quite live yet. We're still working out a few bugs and a couple things, but we are very close. Probably in the next couple weeks, probably we will have this live on our website for anyone to look at. And this is kind of a splash screen to start out with, just some high level numbers. And it kind of sets the stage for the technologies we're going to be talking about. So we're going to be discussing renewable energy technologies broken down in residential, commercial, and utility scale installations, energy efficient buildings, LEED, Energy Star certified buildings, alternative fueling station locations, and electric vehicle registrations. And this is all North Carolina, of course. And then below we show the data sources and when it was last updated, and this needs to be updated. Some of these dates are incorrect. So it's still kind of, that's one of the things we need to work out at the moment. The data is up to date, but the date updated is not up to date. So we need to go through that. We have used Justice 40 stuff in this as well as one of the data sources. We'll get to that towards the end of the presentation.
And Jerry, I'll add real quick that, like you said, this is data that pertains to just North Carolina. However, a lot of this data you can find for other states, and also we kind of the practices that we talk about in this webinar, we view as could very much be applied to developing tools for other states in the Southeast. But because we're the North Carolina Sustainable Energy Association, our mission's mainly North Carolina, this tool applies to that state.
Yes, thank you for that. Okay, so I'll move on to our first tab. So renewable power installations. And some of these, there's maps in a few of these, so there's a lot of data in the background. So it takes sometimes 10 seconds for these maps to show up fully. So just bear with me on that. So this shows all the renewable, solar power installations across the state. Blue being utility scale, green being residential, brown being commercial. So here you can filter by different types of geographic entities. So if you select on one, it's going to select on one of these entities. It'll change this to the type of geographic shapefile that it is. So this should change to municipalities. And then if you select one of these, as well, it'll zoom into that particular municipality in this case. Bellwood, North Carolina only has 2 installations. But sorry, I'm clearing out the selection here. Counties is usually a very popular one to compare to. But what you can do is you can look at individual counties. So Alamance is a fairly popular county. That's where Burlington, North Carolina is, and it'll break down the number of installations and the total capacity installed there. These are all installed in systems, and you can hover over one and it'll show you a little bit more information about it. The residential systems, we've tried to blur the data a little bit. It's not pinpointed directly on a house, and it just says residential system. We don't have any personal information on residential there. But if you wanted to compare it to another county, you could just simply, and this is the use case that we often run into where municipalities want to compare to themselves to somebody else. So you can compare, in this case, Buncombe and Alamance County. Buncombe County is in the mountains. It has the city of Asheville in it. So they have a lot of installations there. So comparatively, you can see that Buncombe, and you can look at their different types of installations. They have 2,800 residential installations there. So this was a popular thing. You know, we would try, I can see we have some outliers, some data points we need to correct here. When presenting this information, like Daniel said, you know, we would show it to a municipality and we would kind of guess what they would want to compare it to. And it was different for every municipality. Some wanted to compare ones that are just really close by, their neighboring municipalities, all they cared about. And some wanted to compare it to cities across the state. So, you know, everyone was a little different. So this provides us, you know, we could be a little bit more nimble with how we present the data, and any county or municipality can look at it any way they want to. And if we can select one of these in residential systems, and it'll only show the residential systems in those territories. So I need to, and when when this goes live, I would recommend, if you have a selection, to clear out the selection. It makes the dashboard work a little better. So moving on.
Jerry, can you say briefly about our main clean energy source, renewable
Yes,
energy
good.
database, which is where a lot of this data comes from? It's a very unique data source that NCSEA has.
Yes, a good point. Thank you. So we collect all the registrations for any sort of renewable energy system that's going to be interconnecting to the grid. They're required to file a report of proposed construction with the North Carolina Utilities Commission, basically saying, I'm going to build some sort of renewable energy system, whether it's a 2 kW system on a residential home or a 100 megawatt solar farm out in the country. You're required to file it with Utilities Commission. It's a public filing. So we track all these filings and collect all the information on them. And then, you know, and its location, its owner, utility they're interconnecting with, in some cases, the proposed cost, the installer, and some other information that we can collect out of there. And then we have a way to circle back and check to see if the system actually got installed. So these are just proposed construction. Not every system that files gets installed. So then we have a way to back check and say that these systems are indeed installed. This is a very unique database that we have not seen anywhere else other than North Carolina. So it's I would say it's accurate within about 95% of the systems in the state. We have an understanding for. So there's a lot of information here. And because we can get location information, we can add other geographic boundaries, political districts, the census IDs. We've done some analysis on voter registration and taxable value, whether it's on a home or on a parcel. We did a report on the increase in utility scale solar taxable value on the land. So when they install utility scale solar on a plot of land in a farming community, we did an analysis on the increased tax value on this land and how it's benefiting, whether it's the county or a municipality if it falls in there. So, and that's to dispel a lot of rumors how, solar is taking over farmland. We hear that a lot. And so we like to go out and say, solar is actually helping these farmers because they get a long-term lease, they have guaranteed money, and we've done some stories on that. So it's been a very good database for us And there's a lot of information in it. And that is proprietary to NCSEA.
Yeah, and it's part of NCSA's approach to addressing misinformation and barriers to clean energy by providing a data-focused and an empirical approach to kind of making the case that these aren't really issues.
Yeah, and we've gone to town meetings and city meetings, you know, where there's been issues with, there's been questions about solar in people's communities, particularly the rural communities. And we've helped dispel a lot of rumors with data-driven answers. So.
Yeah. Well, Jerry, I don't think we have too much time. So if you want to sprint through some of these categories.
Yeah, I tend to go slow in this. There's a lot of information here. Okay, so renewable power generation. So at the moment, this is showing who has the most renewable power generation in megawatts by county. And a large majority of this is utility scale, as you can see. And all these counties, if you're not familiar, these top counties are all in the eastern part of the state, where it's flat, there's not many trees, there's a lot of farms. So that's where the utility scale solar has really taken off. And the cool thing about this is we can, if you want to look at just residential systems, you could look at that by power generation. Wake County, that's where Raleigh is. They have the most power generation for residential. Mecklenburg is Charlotte. Buncombe is Asheville. So these tend to follow the population. And then you can do the same thing with these other, and we can also look at these house districts. This is important for our policy team to look at what's going on in political districts too. So we can quickly, one click, and we can speak to these political districts. And then it breaks down who is in this case, the senator in this district, and it breaks it down there. And then, so, you know, we were originally given these high level numbers of power generation. And of course, somebody asked for, you know, per capita, which is intuitive, but we didn't think about it initially. So we've been adding per capita to these numbers. And if you remember on the previous slide, Wake County was the highest in residential installs, but if you do it per capita, Buncombe County is the highest per capita. So, and again, you could just look at individual counties if you wanted to. You can scroll here just to go down if you don't want to filter it out. And then I'll just move on.
So you can see how this is an upgrade from a static report where we would deliver data to energy planners and they just had to work with the information we gave them here. This is dynamic. You can click on and off whatever county and data you want. This was the idea in trying to like democratize this data and make it accessible to, we want to make it accessible to the whole public at some point.
Yeah, and I will say that, you know, when we would talk to whether it was a county or a municipality, and we probably had 12 or 15 Zoom calls with people to present their data or talk about this information and specifically for their territories. And I would say almost every single one of them was surprised by the numbers. They have no idea that of the numbers that were going on. Some of them knew, Buncombe County knew they've installed a lot of solar, but they had no idea the numbers or where it was at. So this is very, very insightful for these towns and communities. This next slide, it's a lot of information going on here. This basically is showing the same thing as the previous slide, but it just really dives into the numbers. If you really want to look at, you know, comparing population numbers to see how that compares to everything and why some of these are per capita are so high, it's just based on the population. So it just really gets into the numbers a little bit more. It's a very busy slide, but it can be helpful if you really want to look into it. So this is just straight numbers, the number of installations, where the previous one was power generation, so megawatts. So again, you can filter by different system scales, different counties, and then of course the next one is going to be installations per capita again. See a lot of the same trends, but some counties jump up to the top. Same chart as before, just the kind of the data behind that chart, so you can look a little deeper into it. If you wanted to, more renewable energy. Oh, this is a duplicate slide. I apologize. We should have removed that. We already seen that. So this is growth over time. So this is just all residential systems over time by year. So, and it's just straight numbers. This is, so in 2021, there was 7,204 residential systems installed in the state. This number is actually higher than that now. This number is actually closer to 10,000 for 2022. We just haven't updated the data yet here. So you can look at the growth over time, and you can look at a particular, so Buncombe County, a popular one. Again, we haven't updated this number. This shouldn't drop off like that. This should be above it, which we'll update. And you can look to here to see when policies happen, when certain rebates came into place to see, or if you're a county, you can see some sort of sustainability plan that you may have implemented that may have helped these numbers, and look at the data for this. So that's kind of an interesting graph. Okay, so getting out of renewable energy a little bit, we have been collecting climate action plans for different municipalities and counties across the state, at different levels of completion. So climate action plan is being developed. Comprehensive action plan is in place, exists. So sort of environmental committee exists. So whatever they may have for sustainability plans is here. And if you hover over it, it'll show you the town and then a link to the actual plan or action that they may have. And these are also hyperlinks here. So if we clicked on one of those, it would take you straight to that, in this case, the town's page to show you that information. So we've been doing our best to keep this updated. It's obviously, there's probably double the amount across the state, I would hope. It's just taken some time to get through all these. And okay, so now we're going to get into energy efficient buildings. So Energy Star and LEED certified buildings across the state, similar information here, or similar ways to filter down information. I'll use Buncombe County again as an example. You can filter that and then hover over and it'll tell you more about that particular system. Looks like this is an elementary school or a K through 12 school. And it's an Energy Star building. I think if you click on it, it'll tell you more information about it. It's 80,000 square feet. So click off that, and then we can compare to Burke County is also in the mountains, so that's right next door. So you can compare it to Burke County to see different things going on there. Have we had any questions, Daniel, in the chat?
I would be
see any
happy to ask you a
questions.
question, Jerry.
Yes, please do. Please stop me and ask questions.
Yeah, this is in reference to the renewable energy adoption graph showing the peaks and such.
Over time, yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you mentioned that some municipalities, when you show them the data, are unaware of the adoption that's happening, or like the rate of kilowatts, and maybe it was even the graphic before this. What do you credit for the quicker adoption if the municipalities are unaware of it?
So Duke Energy has a solar rebate program. So, and that came into place roughly in 2017, where a certain number of customers every year are allowed to apply for, and it's a net metering thing, but a solar rebate, when they install solar. So that there is a direct result from that, and it has been incredibly successful. There's only so many customers. I forget the number. I want to say 7,000 can sign up for it. It's somewhere in that range, and there's also a megawatt cap as well. It's like 7,000 or this number of megawatts. And they also have it for commercial scale systems as well. It sells out. They open it up on January 1st. It sells out January 1st.
Wow.
It's incredibly successful. We're trying to get them to expand it. Duke doesn't want to. So that's one of the things that we advocate for is programs like that. When we see they're very successful like that, we try to push and continue. And I believe the program expires at the end of this year, at the end of 2023. So I would say there's a direct that's a direct result, no doubt about it.
Yeah, and it's not like the residents are reporting to the local government they got solar, right? So there's just this blind spot with a lot of local governments and a lot of parties and not knowing how much clean energy is in their territory. You know, it's reported to the State Utilities Commission, but there's so many filings there and so much info, and it's taken a lot of time for us to comb through it and compile the data and create this tool. So that really helps
Okay.
the local governments to let them know like how much solar and other clean energy is happening in their own territory.
Have y'all thought about the way that you want to display those types of policies, whether they be utility or state imposed in this? I saw like a similar, you had links to the any type of sustainability plan that the state had, or the county, I guess, or city. And I'm
Yeah.
wondering if it's something that would be displayed here as on the peaks and ebbs of the graphs.
Yeah, so I think that would be great. We have done some visuals for presentations, just kind of a static visual about where things happen. The problem is it doesn't fit. It's with this climate action plans, it could have happened at different points in time for each one of these municipalities. So it's hard to visualize that. I think it's a great idea. Certainly showing the Duke. There's a few data points that we could point out. There's the renewable energy portfolio standard that was passed in 2005, and that was kind of the what kickstarted the renewable energy growth in North Carolina, and the NCSEA was heavily involved. Our executive director at the time helped write that, the reps. So it's data points like that I think are very good, and it's just the problem is collecting them all. And sometimes the city of Apex has done a lot with their climate action and has seen direct impacts on their rooftop solar, but it's hard to apply that to the whole state because that only applies to Apex. So, we're trying to figure out there's some nuances to it, I would say, to try to figure it out. And that's actually specific to their utility there. So the town of Apex is actually a municipality utility. They're not Duke Energy. So they've been doing a good job. So that's a good question though, and something we're working on.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll let you get back to the
Yeah, I'll
rest
get
of
back
it.
on. And I see we only have 10 minutes, so I will this always happens to me when I get into these presentations.
Yeah, Jared, I'd like for us to at least get to show them the energy burden data.
Sure.
Since
I'll go ahead and
this is
jump
a energy.
I'll go through these
equity-focused
quickly. We have
session.
EV registration data by county and by zip code. This is kind of touching on, this is a high level, all registrations throughout the state, electric vehicle registrations, and that includes plug-in hybrid, and all battery electric. These two graphs over here on the right, I really like a lot. So this is gas and diesel vehicle registrations over time. So in 2019, 98% of the vehicles were gas and diesel registered in the state, and 1.65 were EVs. Well, over time, gas and diesel are declining. It's still very high, but the trend is down, and electric vehicles, although this number is still small, the trend is up. So, it's a direct result of policy and implementation across the state. And it's really good to see this. Sometimes you don't realize that it's happening. And then EV registration by county. And you can kind of look at the different numbers here, compare it, hybrid vehicles, battery electric. And then I will move on to, let's move on to this disadvantaged communities. This is a map with a lot of data in the background, so it'll take about 10 seconds for this to come up. So the dark purple are what's classified as disadvantaged communities by the Justice 40. So they have a number of metrics they use to determine if a community is considered disadvantaged. So this is just showing these communities with their renewable energy systems, if they have any in their territory. So if you hover over one, it'll let you know the number of residential systems, number of commercial systems. And then if you could select on one, it'll actually, so let's get to one where there's probably a lot. This is Raleigh. If you select on one of these census tracts, it should filter on the bottom and show you exactly what's going on within that census tract as far as renewable energy systems and what their energy burden percentage is. And I will move on to the next one, which is an energy burden. And we received this data from Justice 40, and that the source for them was the US Census Bureau for this. So this is just showing average energy burden by census tract across the state, where darker purple is the higher energy burden and the lighter blue is lower energy burden. So if you select on one of these, this particular census tract is 9% energy burden. So it's obviously very high. So, and again, it shows you the renewable energy systems that they've adopted in that census tract. And then this is kind of an interesting one. And stop me if if we're running out of time. So this is power generation by disadvantaged communities. So the lighter blue, or the blue, is a not considered disadvantaged community. The purple is considered a disadvantaged community. So with residential, there's more solar installed megawatt wise and in total numbers. This is per capita. In non-disadvantaged communities, which interesting, if you go down to utility scale, it's getting closer. So there tends to be more solar installed in the in some of the disadvantaged communities. So so there's a direct benefit to that, because they should be seeing more tax money in those communities. So it's kind of interesting to look at this, I think. And then there's political party. So same thing, except using political party. It's interesting that it's kind of, there's not great disparities except for the utility scale. Again, utility scale tends to be in the rural areas. That tends to be a little bit more Republican in those areas. So it's not too much of a surprise there, but it's really interesting to compare the two. And then this shows the same thing, except it shows a map. And what is... Okay, so this is just this is an in progress map. This is not for public consumption yet. So, and with that, I will stop there. I'm sorry if I went over.
And I would just say the takeaway is, I know there's a lot of data here, and we had a lot of, for starters, our data was, solar systems installed in the area and EVs. And now we are trying to incorporate more data that lets us know what areas are, disadvantaged, what areas is there a disparity in clean energy deployment, so that we know that information and we can inform planners, give them the data they need to focus their clean energy planning around those areas that don't have clean energy, including energy efficiency, and arguably they're the ones that need it the most. But we need the help of people beyond the organization, some outside eyes, to help us identify what data that we can add to it and how we can develop the tool to make it more useful for this planning for disadvantaged communities. So I'll leave it at that. And we appreciate everyone's attention, and thanks to Sia for having us.
Thanks so much for that presentation. Jerry and Danielle, I'm wondering if you could drop your emails in the chat, seeing we have 2 minutes to wrap up this presentation. So if you could drop your emails in the chat so that our audience can reach out to you and provide direct feedback to you. But on that note, I'm going to share my screen to close us out. So once again, thank you to all of our presenters for your time and sharing this information with us. Quick plug, we have our 5th webinar coming up on programs and access to financing on May 31st. So please do tune in for that. I also wanted to put a plug in for our Southeast Energy Summit coming to you on October 25th to the 27th of 2023. It will be at the Lowe's Hotel in Midtown Atlanta. This will be a space for just anyone interested in energy and connecting to energy. That space will be for you. And we also have our members meeting from June 22nd to the 23rd. Thank you to everyone who has come in and watched our webinar. Thank you once again to our hosts. Lily, is there anything else I should add?
We did have one question in the Q&A.
Perfect. Great
Yeah.
timing.
Yeah, I saw that. Jerry, do you know where we got the data, the Justice 40 data?
It's available right on their website.
Sites. Perfect. Cool. Are there any other questions? Any last minute questions to see in the chat? Otherwise, we can call it a close.
Yeah, other than that, we would appreciate everybody filling out the survey that pops up after this webinar closes. And please note that we will be sending out the recording and any resources mentioned throughout the presentation shortly. So thank you all to joining us for today.
Thank you.
All right, goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.